On May 23, 1981, in Chicago, Illinois, a series of crimes began that would terrify the city. Linda Sutton, a young woman who was in a busy area, was kidnapped. On June 1981, 10 days after, a call was made to the police due to a strong odor near the Brer Rabbit Motel. That motel was known to be frequented by prostitutes and drug users. Sutton's body was found in a field near the motel. It was in an advanced state of decomposition and visibly mutilated. The woman's left breast had been cut off. She was gagged and her hands were behind her back because she was handcuffed. It was determined that she had been stabbed. It was also determined that she had been sexually assaulted by more than one person, which indicated to investigators that it was a group. The case gradually went cold. It was not until almost a year later that the killers struck again. On May 15, 1982, Lorraine Borowski was preparing to open the real estate office where she worked. She would be kidnapped in broad daylight. It would take 5 months to find her body on October 10th. It was located in a cemetery in Clarendon Hills. She was brutally attacked, receiving axe blows to the front and back. Near a highway in Hanover Park, just 2 weeks after Borowski's disappearance, 30-year-old Shui Mak was seen for the last time. The woman was from China and had recently started a new life in the United States. On the day of her disappearance, she was with her brother with whom she had an argument. Her brother left her on the side of the road and drove away. Her body was found on September 30th. She had been beaten to death. She had also been sexually abused by a group of people. On August 28, 1982, the body of Sandra Delaware was found in the Chicago River. She had been strangled with her bracelet and stabbed. Her left breast had been cut off. On September 8th of that same year, the body of Rosebeck Davis was found. The victim had suffered the same mutilations as Delaware. At that time, the police had not found any clues that could lead them to the person or persons responsible for the murders. A woman named Angel York had been kidnapped and thrown from a moving vehicle. The perpetrators handcuffed her and wounded her in one of her breasts before throwing her out, probably with the intention of killing her as a result of the fall. It is also likely that the perpetrators felt confident because the police had no clues as to who was responsible for the wave of murders. York survived, but her description of her attackers was too vague to lead to any suspects. The reality is that the city of Chicago at that time was experiencing high crime rates, reporting 877 murders in 1981 alone and 668 murders in 1982. Because of this series of murders was just one of hundreds of crimes occurring at the time. It wasn't until October 6, 1982, that a clue emerged that would be key to the investigation. A woman named Beverly Washington was found in critical condition in Humboldt Park. Washington was a sex worker in the area and had apparently gone through a real nightmare. Her left breast had been amputated and her right breast had been lacerated. Despite everything, the woman survived the brutal attack. She told the officers that she had been working as a sex worker for some time. On the night of October 6th, Washington was looking for a client when she came across several men in a red Dodge van. One of them offered her more money than she was asking for, so she agreed to go with him. Inside, he pointed a gun at her and pushed her into the back of the van. The walls were covered with wires and tools. The man forced her to take some pills, which rendered her unconscious. The next thing she remembered was waking up in the hospital. On October 20th, 1982, the police stopped Edward Spreitzer, a 21-year-old man. He was driving a red Dodge van that matched the description Washington had given to investigators. Upon inspecting the car, they found knives inside. The handle had also been removed from the back door. It was verified that the owner of the vehicle was a 28-year-old man named Robin Gecht. Gecht was arrested for his alleged involvement in the attack on Washington. He was released on bail. Investigators discovered that Gecht rented a motel room where he and 3 other individuals held parties. They also indicated that it appeared to be some kind of cult. On November 5th, Gecht was arrested again. In the days that followed, Spreitzer was officially arrested at his mother's house. There, investigators found a lot of evidence linking him directly to the attacks. When questioned, Spreitzer pointed to Gecht as the mastermind behind it all. He also mentioned the involvement of 2 other individuals, brothers Andrew and Thomas Kokorelais, aged 19 and 22 respectively. The survivors identified the four individuals as their attackers. Spritzer and Andrew took investigators by surprise when they confessed to their involvement in at least 17 murders. Although investigators knew they were extremely dangerous criminals, the details that only they knew took them by surprise. The members who would cooperate with their confessions were Spritzer and Thomas. Both mentioned that they used to look for women on the street, alone or prostitutes, to convince them to get in the van with them. Once inside the van, they would handcuff them and take them to remote locations to torture and abuse them. They would amputate their breasts while they were still alive. They then took their body parts to the home of Gecht, whom they considered the leader of the group, to perform satanic rituals with the amputated parts of their victims. They then cooked their body parts and ate them. Many of them were taken directly to Gecht's house, where their breasts were amputated with a wire garrote or piano wire. They could use razors, knives, and can openers to make the cuts. He also claimed that Gecht used to masturbate over the amputated breasts of his victims before putting them in a box. Kokoralais mentioned that at one point he saw more than 15 breasts inside that box. One of the survivors, Angel York, recounted that Robin Gecht would cut her breast and, in doing so, enter a frenzied state. He would then proceed to cut her even more in order to masturbate over the wound. He would then seal the wound with duct tape before throwing her out onto the street. Spritzer said that Gecht would force him to have sexual contact with the open wounds. The leader of the group, Robin Gecht, never confessed to anything and always maintained his innocence. Who was this man really? Robin Gecht was born on November 30th, 1953, in Chicago, Illinois. Not much is known about his childhood. However, there were rumors of alleged abuse of his sister. As an adult, he married and had children. He also had a good job. A somewhat curious and disturbing fact is that he did handyman work with another serial killer, John Wayne Gacy. Gecht had an obsession with breasts. He sought out sex workers to ask them to stick needles in his breasts. He even went so far as to ask them to let him cut off his nipples. He met a young man at Winchell's Donuts, where the latter worked. Gecht would go there constantly to make contact with him. The young man was Edward Spritzer. Gecht took Spritzer to his house on several occasions. On one of these occasions, they went out together in search of prostitutes, and it was then that they committed their first murder. The truth is that Spritzer was a very easily manipulated young man. He had an IQ of 75, lived alone, and had no support system. Gecht apparently detected this and decided that he should be part of his plans. They would murder Linda Sutton. Later, Gecht would find two young men who also lived in the same motel as Spritzer. They were the Kokoralais brothers. It was after this that the four of them would participate in all the murders. The brothers told investigators that Gecht was so disturbing that he really intimidated them, but at the same time he was very convincing in everything he said. They mentioned that Gecht was capable of getting whatever he wanted. He convinced them to start performing satanic rituals with parts of their victims' bodies. The amputated breasts were part of the ritual, where everyone had to masturbate on them and then eat them. Gecht's obsession with breasts reached the point where he would injure them so that he could penetrate them. Despite all this evidence against Gecht, he was only convicted of attempted murder and other assault charges. He was sentenced to 120 years in prison. Spritzer was sentenced to life imprisonment. Andrew Kokoralais was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Rose Davis. However, he would receive a death sentence for the murder of Lorraine Borowski. He was executed by lethal injection on March 17, 1999. Thomas Kokoralais was sentenced to file in prison. After years in prison, he was released from prison on March 29, 2019. Gecht's psychological profile is one of the most complex and disturbing. He was a psychopath who sought out vulnerable people to participate in criminal acts. He was particularly obsessed with breasts, mutilating them, and fixating obsessively on the wounds he inflicted on them. We are probably talking about a paraphilia, as his arousal stemmed exclusively from damaging these parts of the body. He masturbated compulsively over the wounds he inflicted on them. Jennifer Furio, who wrote to serial killers to analyze the reasons behind their crimes, asked him about the reason for his fixation with breasts, and he replied, "It's something that runs in my family. From my great-grandfather onward, every male member of my family had married a woman with large breasts. I am very satisfied with my ex-wife, who, according to him, was a 39D. Finally, his level of influence was such that he was the only one not found guilty of murder, and his accomplices took full responsibility. The group, dubbed the Ripper Crew by the press, is suspected of being involved in at least 20 murders of women. Only one man was a victim of the crew, who was shot to death. The bodies of many of their victims were never found because they dismembered the bodies, making recovery virtually impossible today. This is one of the most terrifying groups of serial killers, spree killers, cannibals, and necrophiliacs ever documented. Criminal history has shown that human beings are deeply impressionable. Under certain circumstances, someone can do things they would never have considered on their own. Some psychopaths understand this very well. Some are not only looking control over victims, but also looking control over accomplices, vulnerable people over whom they can exercise psychological control. In that relationship, the psychopath feeds on submission, and the person being manipulated feeds on approval. They don't share the same goal, yet they walk toward the same end, which raises an uncomfortable thought. Is danger defined only by those who kill, or also by those who can turn others into something they never were?